You know how they say history is written by the winners? Well, in football, sometimes a single event just rips up the history books. And today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest what-ifs in the modern game. We're talking about a scandal that didn't just punish a club, it completely redrew the map of European football. And it all kicks off with this one statement. And honestly, it's not an exaggeration at all. This was the reality. I mean, think about this. Just weeks before Italy goes on to lift the World Cup, the entire foundation of its domestic league was about to just crumble. So what was the first domino to fall? What kicked off this whole chain reaction? Wiretaps. A whole series of secretly recorded phone calls. And we're not talking about just one club teetering on the edge here. We're talking about giants of the Italian game, all of them in the line of fire.
And those calls? Wow, they contained some absolutely explosive allegations. So, what was the big accusation? That powerful club officials were influencing which referees got assigned to key matches. Basically, they were accused of trying to control the game before a single ball was even kicked.
And the final consequence? It was unthinkable. Relegation. We're talking about Juventus, the absolute kings of Italy, dethroned and just cast out. Relegated to the second division for the very first time in their history. I mean, talk about a fall from grace.
And that is the huge question we are diving into. What if those phone calls were never made? What if the scandal we all know as Calciopoli just never happened? How different would the world of football look today?
Okay, so before we jump into our alternate timeline, we really need to get a grip on what actually broke in our own reality. Let's understand the foundations that just crumbled.
So what was Calciopoli, really? Well, at its core, it was this massive investigation into phone calls between the super powerful Juventus director, a guy named Luciano Moggi, and the officials who were in charge of assigning referees to matches. And the implication? It was absolutely damning. The suggestion was that Juventus had this huge unfair advantage because they were basically handpicking referees who would be favorable to them.
And wow, the punishment was swift and it was brutal. Juventus, stripped of 2 league titles and relegated. Done. And it wasn't just them. Other giants like AC Milan, Fiorentina, and Lazio all got hit with big points deductions. The result was basically a fire sale. I mean, an absolutely legendary squad, we're talking some of the best players on the planet, was just torn apart in a matter of weeks. All right, so now let's step into that alternate universe. What happens when you just take that devastating punishment out of the equation? Well, the very first ripple effect completely rewrites the entire power structure of Italian football. And the difference between the two timelines? It's just stark. In our alternate reality, Juventus isn't relegated. No, they start the next season as champions. That squad of legends is still totally intact. And, this is crucial, they keep all the financial power and prestige that was just wiped out in the real world. And that, of course, has a huge knock-on effect. You know who benefited the most from Calciopoli in reality? Inter Milan. They inherited a title, they snapped up Zlatan Ibrahimovic from a weakened Juve, and they went on to build a dynasty. We're talking 4 straight league titles. But in our alternate world, that dynasty, it just never happens. But look, this wasn't just about the clubs. The consequences had a massive impact on individual careers too. So let's zoom in a bit and look at one of the biggest stars who got caught right in the crossfire. In our reality, Calciopoli basically forced Zlatan onto this nomadic path, right? He became this brilliant, club-hopping superstar, bouncing from rival to rival, from league to league. A phenomenal career, for sure, but definitely one defined by this constant restlessness. But in our alternate timeline, he's 24 years old, he's at the heart of a totally dominant European power, and he stays. He just stays. Instead of being a nomad, he gets to build a real legacy in one place. You know, he could have become the defining striker of his generation, not just one of the greats. And this is where it gets really big, because this was never just an Italian story. The shockwaves from this were felt across the entire continent. It literally shifted the balance of European power for the next decade. So after Calciopoli, Serie A's dominance in Europe just faded. The financial gap between them and, say, the Premier League or La Liga, it just exploded. The league completely transformed from the destination for the world's best players into a selling league. You know, a place where stars were made and then immediately sold off to richer clubs abroad. But think about it. Without that financial devastation, Juventus stays a European heavyweight,
They don't just keep their own stars, they're out there competing to sign new ones. The idea is pretty simple, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. A stronger Juventus lifts the entire league and helps keep Serie A right there at Europe's top table. And you know what? We can even try to put some numbers on that impact. Based on the way they were going before the scandal, some statistical models suggest that this incredible Juventus team would have reached at least 2 more Champions League finals in the next 5 years. Finals that, in our world, were totally dominated by English and Spanish teams. But really, the biggest damage here, it wasn't just about the money or the trophies. It was about something way more valuable and a whole lot harder to rebuild. It was about reputation. This, right here, is the key takeaway. The scandal absolutely destroyed Serie A's credibility in the eyes of the entire world. Fans, sponsors, broadcasters, they all started looking somewhere else. The league was just tainted. And you can literally see the real-world cost of that credibility crisis. In the late 2000s, when global TV rights deals were just exploding in value, Serie A had to negotiate from a position of weakness. In our alternate timeline, though, they're negotiating from a position of strength, and they stay financially competitive with giants like the Premier League. And there's this one last kind of painful paradox to all this. Italy goes and wins the 2006 World Cup, right? But its heroes come home to a league that's in total crisis. So that golden generation, they preside over a whole decade of decline. And the next generation of players, the ones developed in that much weaker league, well, they're the ones who ultimately pay the price when Italy fails to even qualify for the 2018 World Cup. It's actually unbelievable when you stop and think about it. An entire decade of decline for a league, dozens of massive careers completely reshaped, and a fundamental shift in the balance of world football. And it all came from a single investigation and one set of phone calls. Wild. So that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Was the punishment necessary to clean up the game, no matter what the cost was? Or, in trying to root out corruption, did Italian football basically inflict a wound upon itself that it's never really recovered from? I'll leave that one for you to think about.